While Janet had no trouble finding dates, she sure had problems trying to find the man of her dreams. Another traveler, Nick Grant, an obnoxious Americanized Englishman, was the next to be brought back to her home, and he deserved the fright he received from Neville. Frankly, he's lucky that's all he got. Janet had walked back from the bathroom after having a disgusting roll with this guy and found Neville grasping the man's forearm after he'd attempted to get into her purse. She decided Neville handled it better than any policeman could have, scaring the guy enough to empty his bladder in his jeans. Her next date was with someone of much higher quality, a businessman, just as she had hoped for. His name was Burke Turner, and he was an insurance man, sharing his practice with a friend downtown. This one was too perfect, plus he resembled that character, Onyx, from the book. Okay, maybe he didn't look so much like the character once she sobered up and saw him in the daylight, but if she squinted her eyes, he could pass for a poor imitation. Burke was the closest of a gentleman as she'd been with for a long time. He lived in a regal home on the outskirts of Devondale, and that right there scored him mega points. She didn't even mind that he was divorced. At least he understood women, or had tried to at one time. She never questioned who filed for the divorce or what happened to dissolve 10 years, assuming he would tell her if it was any of her business. And for the time being, Janet was going to enjoy what they had, their compatibility and the security of being with a man who she was hoping could be Mr. Right. 2 months she dated Burke. 2 glorious months that were only mere weeks, even if they did spend almost every evening together since meeting. He took her to see movies, plays, and any ostentatious events in the nearest big town, not to mention dinner at the finest restaurants every night. It was like a fairy tale come true for Janet. She had never been treated with such class, style, and manners, and not had to pay for sex in return. That was something else different about Burke, the fact that the whole time they were dating never once did he even attempt to get her into bed. He stated he was content just to hold and kiss her. Such a rarity he was, she thought. Janet hummed happily to herself as she walked from the bathroom to the bedroom and sat down at the vanity table and switched on the stark light. Burke had invited her to the most expensive restaurant yet, and his reason being was to tell her something. Her heart beat expeditiously in anticipation to hear what she could hardly wait for, his proposal of marriage, or at least some sort of a commitment. She adjusted the magnifying mirror and studied her brows, then plucked the stragglers until the shape formed a perfect arch. Opening the bottom of the drawer, she found her last clean pair of sheer black nylon stockings and checked them for runners. They were fine. As she began to roll the first one up her leg, Neville strolled nonchalantly into the room, not even acknowledging her, and laid himself up on the bed. He didn't care much for the bath she had given him earlier that afternoon after their walk through the park. The detergent, or something she used, was making him itch something fierce, and he noticed as the day grew into night that his fur was starting to come out in large clumps when scratching. He watched from the corner of his eyes as Janet smoothed the second nylon up her shapely leg that was hoisted upon the bench. He could see the discreet brown curls that were still damp and glistening from her shower as they peeked out from the edge of the pink satin underwear. Hiking his back leg up, he looked at what was slowly protruding and aching severely as it grew. Burke poured the remainder of champagne into their glasses, then looked into Janet's dancing eyes as he reached for her hand. "This has been an incredibly wonderful evening, hasn't it?" he asked her with a gentle smile. "The most beautiful night we've ever had together, Burke. The food was magnificent, the atmosphere I could get lost in, and the orchestra playing all that soothing music perfect for dancing in your arms. I'd like to drink a toast then. The final one of the evening to the most incredible woman I've ever met, and to the times we've shared together." "Here, here," she agreed, and raised her glass. If it weren't for the alcohol, she probably would have had a heart palpitations. Burke clinked his glass with hers, then watched as she swallowed the liquid down in 2 gulps. He too swallowed, but it was of his own saliva, leaving his mouth bitterly dry. "What is it?" she asked, noting the look upon his face. There's something I need to tell you." He stammered like a schoolboy. "Yes, Burke," she beamed in a smile. "I don't know how to put this. All night I've been trying to find the right words and put them together in my head, but you've distracted me with your charm and high spirits. Janet, I'm afraid to say. No, that's not how I wanted to start this out. He lowered his head and looked at the navy tablecloth, thinking it would be easier said if he didn't have to stare at her. Look, there's no way of putting this delicately, so I'm just going to blurt it out. Sheila wants to try and work things out again. It was the first time she'd ever heard the name of his ex-wife, or she assumed that's whom he was referring to. It's like meeting the man of your dreams and then meeting his beautiful wife. I've hurt you and don't deny it. I'm really not that bad of a man, just a little confused right now. After 10 years together, and she's willing to come to a reconciliation, I mean. No, there's no need to explain, she said bravely, trying to hold back the tears and not make a spectacle of herself. She picked up the napkin from her lap and delicately dabbed the corners of her mouth. If you'll excuse me, I think I'd like to freshen up about now. Janet walked gracefully from the table and through the room of people. She tapped the mater on the shoulder, then slipped into the ladies' room. The cab let Janet out at the curb and waited until she was safely inside before pulling away. Hey, Neville, she greeted the dog dismally, not even seeing him in the corner, but knowing he was there somewhere. Plunking down heavily onto the sofa, she let out with a sorrowful sigh and stared down at the blue carpeting on the floor. She didn't even comment on the clumps of fur deposited randomly. Maybe she was simply looking past them, trying to figure out where she went wrong. She was still uncertain of her feelings. Should she be angry or upset? Her hopes had been so high, and now they were just shards of glass from the good old imaginary mirror. Another 7 years of bad luck was on its way, she feared. And had there been a bag of M&Ms in the house, she would have devoured it in one sitting, then baked some cookies and gone for the gallon of ice cream in the freezer. She looked toward the kitchen, trying to remember if there was a gallon of ice cream or not. She couldn't recollect, but it didn't really matter. She didn't want to get up ever again from where she sat, mourning her loss in the only feasible manner she could at the time. Call it shock or deep depression, Janet had slipped somewhere. Neville couldn't help but notice, and he walked toward her slowly with his head down and his near blue eyes raised, checking her mood and waiting to be disciplined when placing his paw up onto the sofa. Nothing was said. Ah, he voiced softly when he saw a tear roll down her cheek, then laid his heavy, aching head in her lap. Men, she stated bluntly. I just can't believe my rush of bad luck. I mean, do I have a gray cloud over my head or a sign on my back that says to kick me? This is it. I give up, throwing in the towel. I've tried for God knows how many years, and what have I come up with? Kicked, shit on, and nothing but a scarred heart to show for it. And the saddest part of it all is that I'm not getting any younger. Most people my age are happily married with families, rearing teenagers by now. Hell, I'm not even worthy enough to have been knocked up. Now that's just pathetic, isn't it? No, Neville replied. I just feel like I'm floating debris, orbiting for no particular reason. No goals, no job, no real friends, no husband to pick up after, no kids to diaper and raise. What is my reason for existence? Is it only to play the part of a guinea pig to see how many times a person can survive a broken heart in one lifespan without dying of utter loneliness? That must be it. I am God's little guinea pig put here in this little square cage, paid attention to once in a great while, poked with meaningless pricks, hopeful that someday the keeper of this cage will come by with a key to set me free, then find out it was only my delusional hopes once again. Well, shit on it. Shit on it all, Neville. I'm not going to take the sitting here. I'm going to bed. Maybe I'll be granted a nice dream to replace what I lost tonight. Huh, if that isn't a laugh. Come on, Neville coaxed his inebriated and depressed mistress and led her through the house, checking every doorway and hall with slight hesitations. He even waited outside the bathroom for her, sitting there as obedient as he could while scratching more fur from his sides, leaving the clump set wherever his foot rested. He tried to comfort her during the remainder of the night, tolerating her tossing and turning as she slept, and placing his arm upon her once she stilled. As much as his body ached, still he could see she needed someone, and he was the prime, not to mention only candidate. Over the next few days, Janet did nothing but mope around her home in a ratty graying terry robe that was once a bright white. She hadn't even brushed her hair or teeth, and why should she? What was there to look forward to, and who was there to dress or look nice for? Certainly not a man. The phone had rung a few times the day after Burke broke it off with her. Assuming it was him, she never answered its ring. She didn't want him to think she had nothing better to do than sit around waiting for his call of apology, and he didn't leave any messages. Each day the phone would ring, but each day it would ring less times. She hoped he was taking the hint that she didn't want to be bothered. It would only stir up her emotions again, emotions she was trying to get over the only way she knew how. On one of Neville's necessary outdoor trips, Janet caught sight of Rose Hawberk tending to her precious prize-winning rose bushes. She tried to hurry Neville along, but it didn't work. Yoo-hoo, long time no see, Rose called out when she stood to stretch her legs. I see you made it through the winter again, huh? Yeah, and I sure don't miss it one bit, but don't like what could be coming either. Hard winters could mean a hot, miserably humid summer, you know. Oh, don't even mention it. That's the last thing we need. Say, you feeling okay? You look terrible. Have you been sick? You could say that, I guess. Not being the nosy neighbor, but I can't help but see you haven't been away from the house for nearly a week now, and that big car's no longer coming around. Was that your fella? Was this the operative word? Janet replied, trying to raise a grin, but it wasn't coming. She felt as if her face had been permanently frozen in a frown. Her mother always said someday it would happen, and by golly, it sure as shit did. How attractive that must look, and to make the ensemble complete, matching dark bags under each of her eyes. Quick, where are they holding the Miss America contest this year? She thought comically to herself, but not even that would raise the corners of her mouth. Hey, cheer up there. You're still plenty young. Young for what? Young enough to still be green and not see a blow to the heart aimed straight coming at me? Green enough to have believed there was hope left? What you need to do is get right back up there on that horse and start riding again. There's an idea. Maybe a horse would take me on as a partner. Nah, forget it. Besides, I'd only be a burden on his back, and he'd probably have his own nag back at the stables. Nope, no more men. Not even a well-hung horse. Oh God, now I'm considering horses. An accidental romp with my dog, and now I'm feeling like I'm queen of the animal kingdom. What's next? A loincloth and a bandana to cover my tits while swinging from tree to tree by a vine. Hey, maybe I'm pitiful enough that a chimpanzee would take me in and make me part of their family? I wonder, do they mate for life? There's absolutely no reason for a girl as cute as you to be sitting home. Take Neville out to the park, let him run around, and maybe you'll find a man there. There's lots of lonely people in the world. Say there, Mrs. Hawberk, did you know that Neville introduced me to the joys of true animal loving? Yeah, I'm a certified animal lover now, literally. Yeah, he got me when I was down and branded me. If I have a litter of puppies, would you like one? Are you listening to me? Huh? Yeah, sure. Make me a small promise and get back out again, okay? You owe it to yourself. Get back on that horse and ride it, girl, while you can. Your youth's not going to last forever, you know. Sweet slap, old woman of estrogen addiction. Life's rosy on your side of the fence, ain't it? And just where is your gentleman for the evenings? Pardon my bitterness, but you've had a husband and raised kids. My periods are less and less anymore in the past year or so. Funny, when you're a young whippersnapper, you hated them, but when you reach that certain point where your body stops producing so many eggs, you begin to panic. Did you ever panic? No, of course not, and why? Because you had a husband. Look at me. I won't have anyone to bitch to when I get those hot flashes and major mood swings. Whoopee. You know you're getting old when you haven't anyone to fetch your estrogen bottle for you. Look at all that weight you've lost and how great you've felt since. Don't waste that second breath all by your lonesome. Enough with the cuts, lady. You've stabbed me more than the man on trial stabbed his wife and her friend. Give the gums a rest, would ya? Get back out there and flaunt yourself before I start telling you about my eligible grandsons that live all over. Okay, I'll give it one more try. Just for you. Janet said to shut the woman up. The last thing she wanted to see were musty pictures of these rejects who were probably at least 10 years too young and hear all about how wonderful they were doing in the corporate world. That was another problem. All the descent men her age were either married or gay. Hey, now there's a positive thought. At least Burke didn't dump me for a man he'd had on the side. Wow, what a relief. Not. That would have been more easily accepted. Funny, the entire time we dated, which seemed now like centuries, he never once mentioned the name of his wife until that final night when the curtain came down on the head of the leading lady. Kerplunk! Applause, applause. She escaped with only a wounded heart, but unfortunately her insurance wouldn't pay for surgery since she was a repeat offender in that field. Um, that was the reason, wasn't it? Hey, I've got an idea, Rose said, nudging Janet on the arm, bringing her out of the blank stare at the ground. I bet if you went into the big city, you could find plenty of eligible fellers in those male strip joints. Whoa, blow me down with a feather. The old bag knows about male strip joints. Tell me, Mrs. Hawberk Estrogen, just how did you become so knowledgeable in this field? Oh, wait, chill your loins, Janet. Men don't. Men don't go in there. She spoke aloud, finishing her thought. They dance in there and the women come in to watch. And I could be wrong, but I believe men serve the drinks in little outfits. You can correct me on this, though. I've never been inside one myself, so I can't speak from experience. Nor have I, and you're probably right. Well, there are plenty of fish out there. You just need to rebait your hook and snare one where it counts and reel him in. I'd go out there with you. Now, wouldn't that be a sight? We'll just attach some taps to those orthopedic shoes and kick up some dust at the OK Corello Social Security. Better yet, maybe good old Bob hopes looking to recruit some oldies for his overseas shows. They could call you Granny Tappy Estrogen, the woman with all the answers who knows just how and when to slap you where it hurts most. I could play the freak of the show, the woman whose face froze in a pout. I can see the billboards now. Yes, wouldn't that be an attraction? They'd be paying to get the fuck out, don't you know? Oh, holy Jesus. Did I just think the F word? Congratulations, Janet and Yardley. You just stepped over the threshold of profane words. Can you spew a few to Olrose verbally? Your Neville must be in season. Janet looked down, expecting to see him sitting there on his haunches, showing Rose Hawberk his long red wing, and giving her the eye of come hither, but instead she saw his loose fur flying in the breeze with every scratch. Molting, I guess, was her only excuse. I'd take him to the vet, but he's not too keen on that idea. Well, I bet if you asked old Doc Black, he'd gladly come out here. He's a good vet. Really? Is he single? Oh God, was that a desperate cry of the spinster? Rose gave a short chuckle and said that I wouldn't know, dear, but he is good with animals. Just tell him your predicament and see what he says. Can't hurt to ask, and if Neville's sick with something, you'd be doing him a favor. If it doesn't stop soon, I may have to. It's starting to worry me, I guess. It just comes out excessively in patches. Maybe after I give him a BTH tonight, I'll see what happens and give him a complete going over. One thing, though, is his appetite sure hasn't lessened. If anything, it's improved. Heaven forbid I should turn my back or he'll grab food from the table and have it gobbled down before I know what happened. Could be tapeworm, Mrs. Hawberk offered softly with concern while watching Neville dig at the other side of his body and the fur flying like dandelion seeds on a hot summer day. And then again it could be nothing, but you won't know until. True, true. Janet interrupted the woman and yanked at Neville's chain to get his attention. Ready to go back inside, boy, before people have to drag out their lawnmowers just to get your fur off their yards? He nodded his head in agreement. His head hurt, and the last thing he really wanted was to hear the woman on the other side of the fence gab and nag at every little thing that wasn't any of her damn business in the first place. The nerve of some people sticking their nose up someone else's ass to sniff out their troubles. Now, if a dog did that, that's acceptable. It's their nature, but haven't humans evolved? Oh, Neville, Janet chuckled momentarily. What did he do? I didn't see anything of the unusual. Huh. Janet was shocked and embarrassed at the same time. Shocked that Neville was speaking to her through telepathy, and embarrassed that she commented on it in front of the nosy neighbor. Hold the phone, the in desperate need of Prozac. Just how do you know it was Neville's voice? Maybe I'm becoming so whacked out that I've taken on another personality right here in front of Rose Estrogen, God, and the rest of the world. No, It couldn't have happened when I was inside. It had to wait and rear its ugliness out here just to prove to others that I am actually losing it. Reason being, at least they would know what to admit me for when calling for the men with the white coats that have those funny sleeves, which had to be some sort of a Chinese game, like those toys you put your fingers in and are locked for life. Locked for life? Oh, that was a hoot. Again, she was reminded of her rendezvous with the Studley Neville and how they got locked together. Say, Mrs. Estrogen, did you know that this dog's got one hell of a knot on his pecker that swells up inside you, and you must wait until he calms down before you can get out of that kneeling position? Hell, it's news to me, or was. And while we're on the subject, have you ever had a dog drool down your saggy old boobs when you're already sweating from the heat? I thought I was lactating up a storm, which leads me back to that litter of pups. Are you sure you wouldn't like one? They'd be one of a kind, I betcha. You could take several, as I'm sure I'll produce more than one batch, the way this dog likes to fuck, and you could give them all out to your eligible grandsons so they could get an idea of what I look like. Just be sure to tell them that the long ears aren't of my genes, please, and should they get a male, tell them my clit isn't exactly that defined or large, and that I've yet to find any balls when I masturbate, though I wish I would sometimes. Give me something new to play with since I can't seem to find a man, let alone a man who has them naturally. Frankly, I think the men I have dated have all been neutered. Dismembering their balls ain't all that's involved in the procedure. Did you know we've been lied to? They also reach another inch up and remove the brain. Why are you laughing at this, Mrs. Hawberk Estrogen? Why are you looking at me so strangely as if I'm a creature from another planet? Well, at least you're finally grinning, though I have no idea why. Oh, wow, I guess I am. Awesome. Maybe I need to get back to pruning my roses before it gets too late. I'm hoping for another winning batch this year when they come to judge. And I think I'm on the brink of a new category here. You'll have to come over some time and see them up close. I just may do that, Janet smiled, still hanging on to the last mental thought she had towards men, and how true it was. She wished, before it dissolved like sugar in her coffee, she could share her knowledge with someone, like Mrs. Hawberk. That would no doubt rock the woman's orthopedic shoes and tip her over worse than any cow manure in that valuable slug-infested garden of hers. Once back in the house, Janet found Doc Black's number and gave them a call before the thought escaped her mind. She found out that not only was the doctor not in, but he'd left suddenly, and not more than 5 minutes ago, rushed away in an ambulance with severe abdominal cramps. The receptionist told Janet if this was an emergency, she could give her the number of the next nearest veterinarian, but Janet declined politely, hung up the phone, then went to her bedroom to just rest her eyes. What the hell? She asked aloud and turned over to look at the clock. Shit,